Okay, tonight's episode of the podcast is we got Kate Tosto back with us in the Sell It Faster with McMaster Worldwide headquarters. Welcome back, Kate.
Thank you very much. Welcome to be here. Happy to be here. All that good stuff.
This is probably the first real video podcast that we're going to put it on YouTube and other places, wherever I can. I don't know. I don't even know how to do it yet, so I'll figure it out. I'm figuring this whole thing out as I go along, as it is anyway. Every week something's different. The audio might be different. We're sitting in a different place than we did last time. So, learning as I go. We're having a good time. So tonight we're going to talk about the most recent National Association of Realtors settlement that came out after their landmark lawsuit of supposedly $1.8 billion in damages to sellers who claim they didn't know that they were paying buyer's agents, which I think is not true, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do tonight, and we're going to have fun with this, is we are going to debunk stupid media headlines that came out of this NAR settlement. Obviously, Kate and I have been doing this for a day or two, the real estate game.
Just a day for me.
A day or two, 20 years for me. And what are you at? I
think it's 16.
16. Mm-hmm. We're like old people now in the real estate business since 85% of this industry leaves in the first year.
I was told I have arthritis today.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So we are old.
You really are getting old. Mm-hmm. You remember when that guy called you little girl? Another Remax owner.
This is true.
Not naming any names. So, all right, fun times. So now I have this fancy clicker that we can scroll through these slides that I made to talk about some fun little things that the media has come up with, since they know more than the rest of us.
Love it. And I've not seen these slides.
No, you haven't.
I'm pumped.
Yeah, nothing fancy.
You have a clicker.
And
very
I have
fancy.
A clicker, so I feel fancy. Mm-hmm. And anyone who knows me knows my absolute distaste for mainstream media. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, whoever. I think mass media, I don't even like to call them the mainstream media anymore, because they get less views than my boy Joe Rogan. So we're just going to go through it and read through some of this stuff and talk about why it's wrong. So let's start with what's in the actual settlement. So the actual settlement says, the changes that are in the practice says, these are straight from NAR. We were able to retain the right of consumers to continue to have cooperative compensation as an option, so long as they pursue it off MLS through negotiation and consultation with real estate professionals. Notice that says able to retain. We have done it that way forever. This is nothing new. NAR has agreed to put in place a new rule prohibiting offers of compensation on the MLS. This change will go into effect mid-July. Doesn't say that you're prohibiting from offering compensation. It just says you can't put it in the MLS, the multiple listing service. So that's a change. That's something new.
And you can always not offer compensation. That certainly was an option previously.
Oh, yeah.
Continues to be, so that has not changed as well.
That's right. And there's some great media headlines in there about that one. I can't wait to get to that.
Looking forward to it.
Let's see. There will continue to be many ways in which buyer brokers could be compensated, including through offers of compensation communicated off MLS, as we have long believed that is in the interest of the sellers, buyers, and their brokers to make offers of compensation by using the MLS to communicate offers of compensation would no longer be an option. So once again, can't put those offers of compensation into the MLS. Weird. We're just going to make it more difficult for people to find out what they are and lose a little transparency. But
make it cheaper. I feel like that's what some of the headlines say is let's make it harder for agents to figure things out, take more steps and more time, but a lot of the headlines say it's going to be less expensive.
And somehow that will make things cheaper.
I feel like that's a bunch of girl math, right?
Girl math. You said it, not me. Okay, so the types of compensation available for buyer brokers would continue to take multiple forms. Continue, which means no change. Depending on broker-consumer negotiations, including but not limited to fixed fee commission paid directly by consumers, concession from the seller, or a portion of the listing broker's compensation, which is exactly how it works right now. So
beautiful.
No change.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of synonyms for continue.
Yes.
This evening.
Yes. NAR has long encouraged its members to use written agreements because they help consumers understand exactly what services and value will be provided and for how much. That seems to make a lot of sense. The settlement provides that MLS participants working with buyers must enter into written representation agreements with those buyers. This one is confusing to me. I don't know how, because we don't know how this is going to be implemented.
Lots of questions.
Yes, we don't know how this is going to be implemented. So I don't understand how NAR, the National Association of Realtors, can force me to enter into a contract with someone else or make that someone else enter into a contract with me.
I was going to say, let's not make it about you, Mark.
Yeah.
Let's not make it about the real estate agent. Let's talk about the buyer here.
Mm-hmm.
You are now required, which I'm going to use a synonym of forced, to now enter into a written agreement with that agent, which you've experienced buyers in the past who have probably said like, hey, I don't want to sign this contract with
Sure.
you. I want some flexibility.
Sure.
We even have a non-exclusive buyer agency contract that says you're not under contract with me for a certain term.
I anticipate that will be used a lot after this happens.
That's a good point.
However, as of yet, we don't know what the enforceability of this is going to be.
True story.
So how will they force me to enter into these agreements? Will it be, will they change the code of ethics and say that it would be unethical to not enter into this agreement with a buyer? If they don't, I don't know how it's enforceable because it's not law.
No.
This is between a trade organization.
Yeah.
A trade organization that's agreed to do that. So.
And Mark, I'm loving the slides, but I'm going to take you on a detour.
Oh,
real quick.
Let's do it. I love
Early
it.
on.
We don't need to stick to this by any means. This is just fun.
Sorry. So you mentioned the code of ethics, you mentioned NAR, the trade organization, but not every real estate salesperson subscribes to that code of ethics or is a member of the NAR trade organization.
I think you told me before we started that half of them are not.
At least half of Pennsylvania. So I'm just going to make an assumption and extrapolate that across the U.S. I think that's a fair assumption. And so what we're talking about almost doesn't apply to half of the real estate agents you might be talking to.
Right. Literally half.
Crazy town.
Yeah. So they don't have to abide by that.
Okay. I'm just making sure we're all out in the open here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't even think of that until you said it.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
That's right.
Playing a supporting role.
Once again, this change will go into effect mid-July 2024, which once again, NAR changes their code of ethics. Any required changes that they have to make happen at the annual meeting, which is in November.
I believe so.
So I don't know if there is a mechanism to make that change before that or not. I don't know if they've ever had to make a change to the code of ethics mid-year with like an emergency change to the code of ethics. But otherwise, I don't know how you enforce that. But I guess we'll find out.
It's an interesting point.
Still remains to be seen.
Thank you for taking that detour with me, everyone.
Oh, I love it. So let's see the first headline.
Ooh.
The 6% commission on buying or selling a home is gone after Realtors Association agrees to seismic settlement. So, the first thing, the 6% commission, as if there is some sort of standard commission. There is not. 6%, I think, is probably more rare anymore than it is common or standard. I think, judging by what buyer's agents are being paid out in our multiple listing service right now, that 6% is few and far between for most people. So that's pretty much as a standard, air quotes, gone by the wayside anyway.
Agreed.
So, but in addition to that, there is no standard. We're like preached to. Realtors are so paranoid.
So much training
And so paranoid about having antitrust issues brought about that anytime someone talks about some sort of standard commission, that it's like, I'm not even having this conversation. I'm leaving. We need to delete this thread on Facebook. We can't be doing this.
Leave the room. Leave the meeting.
Leave the room. Even when it's in our own office, which literally when you're talking about it in your own office, that's completely allowed. Because an office can have a standard commission and a fixed commission. It's just a group of realtors cannot. So One office,
Understandably so.
sure. One office can say, hey, it's our office policy. This is what we charge. This is our cost of doing business. So this is the minimum amount we can accept. A group of realtors, like every realtor in Centre County, can't get together and say, hey, you know what? We're all going to charge this across the board.
Wouldn't be good, and I see why.
Right. It's price fixing. Can't do that.
But they can put it in the headlines.
They can put it in the headlines.
I can't say it.
No.
We shouldn't say it. It shouldn't be allowed.
Yes.
But let's make a ton of headlines that say it.
David Goldman and Anna Batney
Coming for you.
from CNN. They said that 6% is the standard. I didn't know that.
But it's also gone.
Yeah, it's gone now.
We're going to talk
It's
about
gone.
that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's gone now. I'm glad I know now that 6% is the standard. I should let all of my sellers know that.
It's going to be unfortunate with the number might be different.
The ones that aren't paying me 6%. All right, well, let's look at the next one. This is another David Goldman headline.
Thank you, David, for this material.
Yeah, thanks, David. You're doing great at being terrible at your job. The way Americans buy and sell homes is about to get turned on its head. Yeah, no, it's not. It's definitely not. It's not going to get turned on its head. It may need some adjustments. People might make adjustments, but it is definitely not getting turned on its head.
David,
Mr.
was
Goldman.
this article printed? Was this printed in a newspaper?
Yeah, exactly.
I think your industry has changed.
Yeah.
And probably so will ours, and it will continue to do so, and we will continue to adjust.
David's industry was turned on its head.
At least RE/MAX Centre Realty agents will. They'll continue to adjust, which is why I love them.
Yeah. Like we've already said, I don't think much is going to change. There's going to be some adjustments. But let's continue.
Please do.
This is from that article, as it says at the top. The way
I haven't
Americans
read this. I'm so excited.
buy and sell homes is about to get turned on its head. An earth-shattering, multi-billion-dollar antitrust ruling against the National Association of Realtors late last year led to a settlement on Friday that will loosen the powerful trade grip's stranglehold on the American housing market. The $418 million settlement with a group of home buyers is expected to take effect sometime around July. First mistake, that's a group of home sellers that brought that lawsuit.
So much validity to this article.
Yeah, he's already screwed that up.
I wonder if he's part of a union.
Yeah, well, will take effect sometime around July, pending a judge's approval. It would transform a number of rules and guidelines set by the NAR that critics have said have kept housing prices artificially inflated. I still have not figured out how these things keep housing prices artificially inflated and how this settlement is going to deflate them.
So I think...
And I'm sure all of those sellers that currently own homes would rather their home price is not deflated.
So my guess is, and I'm putting my consumer hat on, I own a home. I'm thinking that when I go to sell this home, I'm not a real estate agent, just have my normal consumer hat on. I work at CNN writing articles. My house is worth, I'm thinking $400,000, but now I need to pay a real estate agent a certain percentage. So I'm going to increase my price in order to offset that commission. That's where I'm thinking the inflation comes in.
Oh, well, maybe. But as we know, and as we tell sellers all the time, what you need to net out of your house has no bearing on market value. Your house is worth what it's worth.
Okay.
So,
you could try to put that into the price.
Right. If you need to get so much money out of your house and you need to net that much, then you should make sure you owe less money on it.
Okay.
So I don't think that's going to deflate housing prices.
That's the only argument I can think of.
Yeah, it's not a good one.
Okay, sorry.
Let's see what else Mr. Goldman has to say here.
Thank you.
The TLDR. Do you know what that means, Kate?
No.
The too long didn't read.
Is that like a Reddit thing or
Probably.
something? Oh,
Probably.
Lord. I
Says-
just got an iPhone. I can't deal with all these acronyms.
I know. Now you get airdrop and all
boy.
that stuff. The too long didn't read. 6% commissions split between the buyer and seller's brokers will no longer be the norm. It wasn't to begin with.
News to me.
Yeah. Agent commissions are expected to fall, in some cases dramatically, because they will be competitive and negotiable. Newsflash, David, they always have been competitive and negotiable. And sellers will be able to shop around for better rates. Newsflash, David, they always have been. and other broker tactics that critics say are anti-competitive, such as a rule that made sellers agents set compensation for buyers agents, will be prohibited. That's not true at all, because there is nothing in that settlement that says that sellers can't compensate buyers agents.
Correct.
He just says right there, the rule that made sellers agents set compensation for buyers agents. There is no rule that makes sellers agents set compensation for buyers agents.
There was no rule previously, and there's no rule in the settlement. So that has
Correct.
kind of just stayed the same.
So it's never been that way. We did not have to offer compensation to a buyer's agent. It was just a good idea to do that.
I would love to poll how many people have read the settlement. Like the actual words.
Right.
How many people have read it and then wrote an article about it?
Right.
That's my poll question.
This guy has clearly just made stuff up.
I read the settlement.
Right. Because there is nothing that says that in the settlement.
It's really boring.
Yeah.
108 pages.
You read the whole 108 pages?
That's pretty boring.
Yeah. You should get paid extra for that.
Thank you. Oh, I can't.
Okay. Once again, goodbye 6% commissions.
Is this David still?
It's still David.
Okay.
Still David. For decades, Americans have paid a standard commission of around 6%. Well, if it's around 6%, then how is it the standard commission? Like a standard commission would imply a set number, not around 6%. If it's around 6%, that says to me that it's competitive and negotiable, which it always has been. When selling a home, split between the seller's broker and the buyer's broker. The National Association of Realtors and its 1.5 million agents say those fees are negotiable. 2 of them in this room just said so. There are only 2 in this room, but 100% of us said it is negotiable.
I wanted a dog in here, but you said no.
Yeah, he doesn't know anything about negotiation. But certain NAR rules have kept commissions significantly higher than in other countries where they can average around 1 or 2%. I don't know what certain NAR rules Mr. Goldman is referencing, since there is nothing in any NAR rule that says, A, you have to offer any sort of compensation, and B, what that compensation needs to be.
Cannot locate it.
None of those things exist. So once again, made up. Fake news.
I was going to say I hesitate to say fake news, but you just said
Fake news. Typically, the 6% commission, which once again, not real. Typically 3% for the seller's broker and 3% for their own agent was passed on to the buyer in the overall cost of the home, which buyers can pay off over decades in their mortgages. But after the settlement is finalized, buyers may end up paying their agents in new ways, including perhaps a flat fee. A separate new rule will require buyers' brokers to enter into written agreements with their buyers, which generally speaking, we already do. Mm-hmm. It's just not been a rule. Yeah. People have had free choice to enter into whatever sort of arrangement they would like to, or none for that matter. But now they're required to. Although that will add transparency to the home buying process, it won't. We'll talk about that in a second. It could become burdensome, particularly for first-time home buyers, many of whom already have difficulty coming up with all the money they need for a down payment, closing costs, a lawyer, and all the other fees associated with buying a home.
So, Paul, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't want to cut you off.
No, I'm not on.
So I did not read this article.
Right.
I came with my own.
Yep.
We've talked about some. Didn't read this. So he says.
TLDR. Too long, didn't read.
Perhaps. So he says in this article that that cost was passed on to the buyer over time. So the buyer was able to still pay for it, but just through the mortgage.
Through the mortgage. Because it's in the cost of the home.
So now the buyer is going to be paying for it, but pretty much up front.
Up front. Or they're going to finance it on top of the cost of the home.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood what he was saying.
Right. It doesn't,
I don't feel like I need to explain any further.
It doesn't pass a logic test to normal human beings.
I love when logic carries. And I am not the smartest person ever.
Yeah.
But I love when logic carries, and this does not carry for me.
No, it doesn't pass this very simple logic test of, before it was in the price of the home, which they would have to pay off over years. Well, now they either have to pay it up front, or they're going to have to finance it into the cost of their home if they don't have money.
And he admitted the buyer pays for it.
Right. Which was the lawsuit that said that the sellers were paying for it. And that's what they won on, that the sellers were paying this fee. Well, he just said that buyers pay it in the cost of the home. So,
which I don't disagree with. I'm agreeing with David here.
I don't disagree with it either. As I was actually in a Facebook argument today, you know, one of my favorite things to do.
Don't do that.
Where some guy in a real estate Facebook group said that sellers have always paid for the commission through the equity of in their home. And my argument to that was, well, what if they don't have equity in their home? Has anyone not ever sold a house that the seller had no equity?
Yeah.
And people argued with me about that. They said, oh, you know, then they just can't sell their house. I've had plenty of sellers that have sold a house they had no equity in, and they just brought a check to closing.
This has happened.
Right. So that's how they paid for it. And they didn't have any equity, but they still paid a commission. So they don't just pay for commissions out of the equity in their home. Sometimes it's through a check, but mostly it's from a buyer bringing cash to a closing that pays for, they're the only ones bringing money unless the seller is negative equity and he's bringing a check. They're the only ones bringing money to the equation.
Which is interesting because even if we agree with the previous argument that home prices are inflated due to the commission, the buyer is still the one paying for it, given this carrying logic.
Right.
Okay.
Which just reiterates that NAR's lawyers were horrible.
I'm excited to hear your transparency topic.
Oh, that'll be good.
Okay, good.
New rules for brokers. One rule that particularly irritated NAR critics is going away. The requirement that sellers' brokers advertise the commission they will pay brokers' agents. The NAR now prohibits brokers from advertising that compensation. In fact, it does not. It prohibits them from advertising it in the MLS.
Correct.
They could
put it's also not approved yet, so it's not even a nowism.
Correct.
Whatever.
That's not now. But if it stands the way it's been proposed, then a seller, how do they say, the seller's broker could literally send out flyers to every agent in town and say, we're paying 2.5%.
Shoot out a mass email.
Right. Shoot out a mass email. They just can't put it in the MLS.
So I'm going to know.
Right.
Probs.
We're all going to know. We're all going to make a way to find out.
Which is probably a good thing.
Right.
Right? I don't hate it.
Right. It's not going to be a big secret. So we're all going to know. That rule had led to 2 bad outcomes for buyers, affordable housing advocates claim. The first is that it kept commissions artificially high. I don't really understand the logic on that. The advertising the commission kept commissions artificially high. Well, how? Just because people thought they had to match it?
I can't even discuss this.
I don't know the logic train on that one. But second, and this is one of my favorites, it led buyers' brokers to push more expensive homes on buyers so their payout would be higher. That's laughable to me. That is, prove it is funny. But it's absolutely laughable to me that the difference that I would get in that was, first of all, worth my time to push people to literally try to push buyers, push, my clients into a house they didn't really like so I could make a little more money, because the difference in that is minuscule. It's absolutely minuscule. And I think I have an example here. At $350,000 versus $375,000. Because we're not talking like, if someone wants to buy a $350,000 house, they're not also looking at a $700,000 house, because those are vastly different properties. At that difference, the difference in commission is $562. That's not worth me showing them an extra house. If they want to buy that house and we can get it for them, that's the one they're getting. For most realtors, they're on some sort of commission split with their broker. If they're on a 70% split, it's $393. So that's just a stupid argument that we would go and push people to buy a house that's slightly more expensive so I can make an extra $393 by spending hours more time showing them other houses, that are more expensive, trying to convince them of it, and potentially making them angry and thinking they got pushed into something they didn't want to buy. And now they're not going to refer their friends and family and everyone else to me because they feel like they got pushed into something they didn't want. Now let's talk about the transparency part. So we have now removed the ability for anyone to see what buyer's agents are being compensated.
Including buyers.
They have to enter into an agreement with you. But previously, it was in there on how much that the seller was willing to compensate a buyer's agent for bringing a buyer to their property. Yep. It was on Zillow. It was a requirement. We had to do that. That was a change, like a year ago, 2 years ago, yeah. Where it had to be everywhere. It has to be on my website. Anyone that has an IDX, an Internet Data Exchange feed, so the feed for all of the listings, has to have all of the buyer's agent compensation numbers on their website. So it's completely transparent. So wouldn't it be better to find out if the buyer's agent is being paid 2% or 3%? Because in that same example, if they're getting paid 1% more, that's $3,500, not $393 or $562. It's $3,500. It's a whole other percent. You won't know that now.
Yeah, the unintended consequences, because I think the transparency is so important and so huge, and it's very important for both buyers and sellers to know what the compensation piece is and that it is negotiable. But we've removed a part of that due to the settlement. It will no longer show on Zillow or other public websites for buyers to be prepared for, to know. And it's not going to be on a data sheet that I possibly hand the buyer in regard to a house. That unknown, I can't imagine being a positive.
Right. So a buyer is going to have to enter into a listing or a buyer agency contract.
Required.
With their buyer's agent if they choose to have one. And they're going to know what they're required to pay that person. But it might be a different number that's actually being offered out.
And no one knows.
Because the only people that are going to know it at this point is the listing broker and the selling broker.
I've never been in a situation where I've said uncertainty is awesome.
Yeah.
It helps me so much.
Lack of transparency is good.
Yeah. I feel like we actually took a few steps forward with having those commissions on public sites for the consumers to see. And now to remove them, because those are fed through the MLS, right? And now the commission percentage will not be or the compensation will not be in the MLS. Not only do the realtors miss out on that information, but the buyers do as well, right. Which just stinks all around.
Yep. Now it's hidden in a back room website somewhere or on some paper that circulated or a text message. I saw a meme the other day that was floating around that is, buyer agent compensation circulated through the MLS and everybody was happy, and buyer agent commission circulated through text. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. Cause that's what's going to happen. We're all just going to start texting each other going, hey, what are you paying out on this? Those payouts are still going to happen, but now we're just going to get them a different way and it's going to be a secret. So,
and again, I feel like I said this a few minutes ago, we're going to take more steps, do more work.
And somehow it'll be cheaper.
Yeah.
Logic.
Not good at math, but
I feel
like it doesn't make sense.
Right. So the next one, Realtor's $418 million settlement could bring your dream home within reach.
How? Tell me.
I know. This is amazing.
I'm pumped.
Now that we've had this settlement, I can finally afford that $1 million home in Key West.
I could move.
Yeah. I'm done. I don't need to sell real estate. I can buy my dream home
Give
now.
me the secret right now.
The secret. The National Association of Realtors agreed to a deal Friday that would, pending a federal judge's approval of the deal, put an end to long-standing policy of not allowing registered real estate agents to list properties for sale in the widely used multiple listing services database unless they included the amount of compensation the buyer's agent could expect to receive. This shady method of doing business might soon be a thing of the past. So this whole idea of being transparent and telling people is apparently a shady method. So it's for not allowing registered real estate agents. I don't know what a registration is.
I was going to ask.
I would think
that
might
closer.
mean
I didn't know.
Licensed, but maybe we're like the AKC, American Kennel Club.
I was going to say.
Registered. You got papers on that realtor. To list in the widely used multiple listing services database unless they included the amount of compensation. What's the required amount of compensation, Kate?
Zero.
Zero.
I mean, there is none necessarily, but it could be zero.
Correct. What was the required amount of compensation before we changed it?
See above.
It was 1 penny.
True.
Previously, when we did have to include some amount of compensation, the minimum amount was 1 penny.
I often saw it as $1. And I say that because I saw it because it happened.
Yeah, literally 1 penny. And then we changed it to make it $0. So we went from a penny to 0. Huge moves. Big moves.
Seismic, I think it said.
Seismic. My dream home is now within reach after this seismic change. Despite record high home prices, American home buyers might have finally caught a financial break. Yeah, because the inflation's really helping. It's widely believed that the changes, if they're approved by the federal court, will not only significantly decrease the commissions that real estate agents receive, but that they will also bring down the costs associated with buying and selling a property. It might, in a best case scenario for home buyers, reduce home sale prices. Couple things in that one. So
hit me.
Yeah. So significantly decrease the commissions that real estate agents receive. How? What in this settlement will decrease the amount of commissions we receive? There's nothing. Like, nothing says you can't charge more than this amount. Nothing says you can only charge this amount. There's nothing in there. All it says is you can't put the number in the MLS. You can't tell anybody what it is. So somehow people think that means it just goes away. And that, I think that's the biggest misconception about this settlement altogether, that now sellers don't have to pay anyone ever. They never did.
You could be a FSBO right now.
Sure.
Today.
Yeah. You never had to pay anyone.
You can work with a broker or an agent who is willing to negotiate their commission super low.
Right.
There are companies that specialize in that.
Right. It is completely negotiable. I have listed properties from literally a 0%.
Very kind.
I listed a lot one time where the seller was unhappy about something that happened. So I offered to do it for free, as long as he still compensated a buyer's agent. So it was the exact opposite of what they're saying here. And I've also listed stuff for 10% or even more for flat fee type stuff. So it's always been negotiable. Let's see, what else to say? Not only will it significantly decrease the commissions, but it will also bring down the costs associated with buying and selling a property. What in this settlement has anything to do with any other costs associated with buying or selling a property?
Oh, other costs? Nothing.
Other costs? Nothing.
No.
Absolutely zero. So that was just filler. Someone needed to send a certain amount of words to their editor.
A little number of characters.
This is like back in college when you're like, you got to have a 10,000 word essay. And they just threw in a couple extra words there because that's completely untrue. There's nothing in the settlement that has anything to do with any other costs involved in buying or selling a property.
I have not spoken with a buyer. There have certainly been comments from sellers that I have fielded, but I have not spoken with a buyer yet. I don't know if you have, Mark, that has said, this is awesome.
No, I haven't really spoken to any buyers about this. I have spoken to sellers that did not necessarily understand what was going on. And when it was explained to them, they basically were like, oh, so there's really no change. Correct. So I guess that air quotes, oh my God.
As I mentioned, I read through the settlement and some of the practice changes, and there are many different bullets, or Roman numerals actually, I think, about eliminating the requirement or prohibiting the requirement of the seller having to pay compensation. And it just was never the case. And I apologize if you were told incorrectly. But we're going to keep moving forward with it being negotiable and just transmitting it differently.
Right. It's never been required. It's never been required to pay a buyer's agent. I mean, I guess before we had to offer some compensation, like we talked about, it was a penny. But it was just the best practice to do that because you would attract people who represent buyers, because there are agents whose sole job that's what they've decided to specialize in, was being a buyer's agent. So those people have buyers that are willing to buy your home, and they would like to be paid for their work. So
crazy,
which is a crazy idea, that you might go to work on Friday and be compensated for the work that you've done.
This industry is just so different and so interesting that you can work super hard and not get paid.
Oh, yeah.
And it's almost a foreign concept, which I feel like is what spurs on a lot of this controversy. But could you imagine going to your 9-to-5 job and someone just saying, hey, your pay's changing today? And you would be thrilled.
Right.
Probs not.
Oh, hey, you worked all day? Oh, yeah, we're not paying you.
No.
We decided to go a different route.
Yeah. And I feel like change sometimes spurs change. And the idea of compensating an agent for the level of work they do or they provide, like if you were to do that on an hourly basis, you're looking at probably a lot more than what's currently being compensated for.
Yeah, like my most famous story about this is I worked 6 years on one transaction.
No, you did not.
I did. I worked for 6 years on one transaction. It was the biggest transaction of my life, $15 million, and would have also been the largest paycheck I've ever received.
Sure.
Compensation. And it fell apart.
I like the word paycheck.
Right. Like we were to the point where we were at the 1 yard line and they were asking for our wiring instructions to pay my commission, and it fell apart. And I didn't get paid anything.
For all the work that you had done over 6 years.
Over 6 years. Got paid $0 for that 6 years of work. And I just understand that that's how this business works. It sucks, but that's how this business works.
Sure.
Sometimes you invest a lot of time and you get nothing back. And for that reason, people think that real estate agents are paid too much. Like there's a lot of times where it is very easy. Sometimes you get a transaction where you meet a buyer or you get a buyer from Zillow, or someone calls you and says, hey, I have to buy a house this week. Let's go. I'm paying cash. I need to close in 2 weeks. And it's a super easy transaction. Those things are few and far between. Those are dream clients that agents have. That hardly ever happens. We end up putting in tons and tons and tons of work and spending tons of money to do it. You know, we're all independent contractors. No one's paying us for our mileage.
No, there are lots of other expenses as well.
Right. You know, we have a new agent who's already told us he hasn't had a single sale. He said he's in 10 grand already. Hasn't sold anything. No prospect of getting paid in the near future. He's already got 10 grand in.
Yeah, I think when you see that agent's compensation, which might be a few $1,000s, I get it. They also may not have been paid for 2 months of the work that they have put in.
Right.
And again, when you do the math on that, think about not getting paid at your regular job, right? You probably wouldn't work there. You probably wouldn't do it.
Right. Or you would at least, if you waited 2 months to get paid, you would like to get paid for the previous 2 months. And that's understandable.
Absolutely. I think your last podcast with Brandy McCulley from Universal Settlement Services, if I remember correctly, she said like 70% of properties have title issues, which are issues the realtor also has to work through and deal with and may not get paid on if it's a big issue or something we can't overcome. And so most of them are not smooth to that point.
Correct. You know, like today, Ryland's transaction. Washer and dryer aren't there closing. There's conflict. You know, it's not like going to a regular 9-to-5 job. Like, and if that doesn't close, those buyers decide to walk away because of that. He doesn't get paid.
Yeah. And we've talked in our previous podcast between me and you is there's risk and there's reward in this business. And, you know, if you're seeing these commissions that agents are making or compensation that these agents are making, I would tell you to call me. Let's see if you want to get in this business, right? Let's see if you make a ton of money and maybe this is the business for you.
Everyone tells me it's easy money. And
I can do part-time.
And I wish it was easy money. And if it is easy money, why aren't you doing it?
Yeah, why have I gained 30 pounds?
Right. If it's easy money and it's realtors don't do anything, why aren't you in this business just crushing me and making way more money than me and buying your dream home now that this settlement's happened? You know, why aren't you doing those things?
I welcome you.
But yeah, we're happy to take you on at RE/MAX if that's the case. We'll even cover all of your expenses.
You're funny.
So
let's get back to the slides. I'm pumped.
Moving on.
I haven't seen these.
Here in the United States, a 5 to 6% commission on the final to be paid by the seller on the final sales price is so standard we rarely question it. Well, 5 to 6% now. Before it was 6% was standard. Now we're at 5 to 6.
A range.
A standard should be a standard, shouldn't it? We should question it, they say. There are precious few countries where the rate is so high. In the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Singapore, it's about 2%. In Spain, Germany, and the UAE, it's 3%. You want to know something about those countries?
Yes, please.
They don't have buyer agency.
Tell me about that. I don't understand.
Their buyers don't get represented.
So I'm a buyer in Singapore.
So let me speak to the United Kingdom directly, because I did have clients who moved here from the United Kingdom.
Oh, interesting.
And I asked them.
First-hand account.
I asked them, how does it work over there when you buy a house? They said, oh, it's completely different. An estate agent in the UK doesn't really do anything. They don't let you in the house. You make an appointment and the seller shows up and lets you in the house. You tour the house, and if you decide you want to buy it, you talk to the guy that has it listed, and you have no representation. You have no one looking out for you. They even said to me, you guys work way harder than the agents do over there. So, yeah, they're getting 2%, but apparently they're not doing anything.
You get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for. There's a lot of really funny reels about that now.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Oh, yeah. I just watched one the other day where it was a realtor obviously made it, and he was hanging out with his friend, and his friend says to him, hey, man, I'm going to buy a house. He goes, oh, I'd love to work with you. And he says, oh, okay, cool. I'd love to work with you too, but I found a guy that'll do it for $1,000. He's like, I'll do it for $500. He's like, oh, cool. Let's get started then. And so they leave the place where they're at, and he goes and he gets in the buyer's car. He goes, oh, what are you doing? He goes, $500. Remember, you're driving. He goes, so then they get to the house, and he throws his phone to him, and he goes, hey man, the lockbox code is this. Let me know how you like it. And he goes, what do you mean? You're not going to show it to me? He goes, no man, $500. Remember? And he goes, oh, cool. I love this house. I want to write an offer on it. And the guy throws him his laptop. He goes, yeah, it's about 40 pages of forms. Get to it. And he, well, what do you mean? You're not going to write the offer? He goes, no, man, $500. So just like you said, you get what you pay for. You know, there will be a race to the bottom of people that think that they're going to cut rate everything. And those people will not last, because this is an expensive business to be in. You know, I've told people before, my monthly expenses before I pay myself are upwards of $10,000 a month.
True. I see your invoice.
Right. And then I have to pay myself. So all the
silly.
Silly. My mortgage guy, shout out to Motto Mortgage, would really like to get paid every month. So, you know, yeah, commissions in Europe and Singapore and the UAE are lower, I'm sure, but they also don't have buyer's agents. So if you want to have a buyer's agent, you have to pay the buyer's agent an additional amount, which gets you to what? Probably about 5 to 6%. So it's the same thing. They just, once again, logic is not their strong suit. When online listings first became a thing, there were widespread predictions that listings that could be directly accessed by eager home buyers would bring real estate prices down in the United States. But no such thing happened. Zillow just didn't crush the market like Expedia, like everyone said. The likely explanation, letting buyer's agents know the commission up front discouraged them from showing homes which offered them less money. Last year, a working paper that parsed Redfin data confirmed that what my husband and I were told last year was all too real. Homes with lower buyer agent commissions not only took longer to sell, but they were also less likely to find a buyer at all.
Mark, I didn't even know you had this in a slide, and I printed out something similar. Different article. Similar research.
Same concept.
Yeah.
Same lack of logic. So they've just said that this whole getting rid of buyer agent compensation, which doesn't actually happen. We're just not telling people what it is we're not telling people what it is in the MLS.
True.
We're still going to know before we show it.
Probs.
And we should, because if we're showing one that doesn't get pay out and the buyer has to pay, We need to tell the buyer
The buyer needs to know. That's
the
super
buyer
important.
needs to know before we show the property.
It's not about the agent. It's
Right.
about a lot about the buyer here.
Right. Because if the buyer's going to have to pay, then they need
to
to know if that seller is offering compensation or they are not.
Mm-hmm.
If the seller is going to pay the commission or the buyer's going to be expected to.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to know that. So this says homes with lower buyer agent commissions not only took longer to sell, but they were also less likely to find a buyer at all. So the logic is removing buyer agent compensation altogether is a good thing. That those homes now are going to sell so much easier.
Well, yeah.
Did I miss something? Did I miss something here? Or does this just completely not make sense to everyone in the world?
Yeah, I don't, it's...
Except, of course, this journalist and her husband.
Mark, shooting from the hip question. How many sellers do you work with who are often also buyers?
Oh, sellers, once they sell a home, also have to buy
I
somewhere
feel like they might need to live
live
somewhere. Crazy concept.
They might need to. They might just go and rent somewhere. They
True.
might live in their car. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
They might choose #van life.
That's my life.
Right. Well, those vans are more expensive than houses. Yeah, they also have to go buy a house.
Okay.
So
it sounds like many of the sellers you work with also are buyers.
right.
in
So are
turn.
they making out at all?
Probably not.
They're probably not. So now whatever they didn't pay going out,
They have to pay to the
if they
buyer's
didn't
agent.
pay it going out, now they have to pay it on the other side.
Unless they don't have representation, which there's a whole mixed bag of why that's a bad
Right.
idea.
If they don't have representation, and we're going to get to that one. I think that's my favorite slide out of
Okay.
all of the ones I put together.
Good to know.
So then this journalist, we'll use that term loosely, goes on to say, it's little wonder then that real estate professionals are scrambling for reasons to decry the new rules, making claims that the new rules are penny wise and pound foolish.
Au contraire.
Au contraire. As the saying goes, if you aren't paying for the product, you are the product. This settlement forces that reality out into the open, and by doing so, might well make the process of buying a home simpler, more transparent, and perhaps cheaper, that will benefit all home buyers, from the richest to the poorest. How?
I got nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. Making claims the new rules are penny wise and pound foolish. I would agree with that. The new rules are penny wise and pound foolish.
Can you explain this to me? As the saying goes, if you aren't paying for the product, you are the product. Do you understand that? What are they going with there?
So I understand the saying. I'm not exactly sure where they're going.
The application here.
To here.
Okay.
Like if you're a buyer and you're not paying the buyer's agent compensation, you're somehow the product. I don't think that really equates in this situation.
I wasn't sure if I was missing something.
Like I get where I understand the saying, like you use Facebook. You don't pay to use Facebook because they steal all of your personal data.
Use the product.
And then they use it for data mining and things like that. And, Temu, whoever sells all your credit card data. I don't know. I didn't even know what that was until after Super Bowl ads.
Okay.
I'm old and arthritic like you. So I don't get the logic on that, like how this will somehow make the process of buying a home simpler, like telling you that you may not be able to afford representation in buying a home, and somehow that will make things simpler.
Yeah, I think, and that's my frustration, is I want it to be good. I want it to be simple. I want it to be transparent. I want it to be affordable. All of those things are things that I want. I just don't see how this does those things.
Absolutely.
That's where my disconnect is. And it's sad because working with buyers and sellers, I want them all to succeed. I want them to accomplish their goals. Home ownership is super important. Again, don't know if this accomplishes that.
Yes, I would love for this process of home buying were getting simpler. I've been doing this for 20 years. Mm-hmm. It has not gotten simpler.
No.
It is not going to get simpler. It gets more and more complicated every single year. There's more and more regulation every year. There's more and more mortgage and financial regulation. There's crazy amounts of wire fraud now that didn't exist 20 years ago. It's a very complicated industry. And now we're saying, you know, it would be great. Maybe you should do this without a professional to help you.
Mark, detour number 2. Lo siento, mi amigo.
Oh.
Veterans. Like, we're talking about making the process easier and protecting consumers. Tell me a little bit about veterans. You are one, sir.
I am
Thank
a
you for your
veteran.
service.
Ah, my pleasure. So, veterans, as the current VA rules go, you can't pay a commission at all. You cannot pay any sort of buyer agent compensation.
So I see a house I like.
Yep.
I'm a veteran.
Yep.
I am not, but in this example, I am. I see a house I like. They are not offering compensation. I'm willing to pay my agent, but literally VA financing, VA lending says I cannot.
At this point, that is correct.
Oh my.
You cannot.
What do I do?
You either have no representation.
Great option.
Yeah.
Notice the sarcasm.
A great option. That's basically it. Or you
I buy a different house, perhaps.
or
because
you
I
only get
can't?
to buy houses where the seller is offering some sort of buyer agent compensation.
Oh my.
And so that's going to limit the amount of buyers in the market too, which isn't good for sellers.
No, it's going to be cheaper and better. I
And-
feel like I saw that on the slide
And simpler.
in an article.
Simpler.
Oh.
It's going to be much simpler.
Okay.
Yep. Au contraire.
My mom's French. She'll appreciate that.
Yeah. Real estate lawsuit settlement upends decades-long policies that help set agent commissions. And just looking at this headline, it seems like they had to mortgage their space bar because they're missing some spaces. Or had to fire the proofreader for some reason. I don't know.
Ding, ding.
So this one says, as part of the settlement, the NAR agreed to no longer require a broker advertising a home for sale on MLS to offer any upfront commission to a buyer's agent.
Upfront compensation?
Yeah, upfront compensation. That's my favorite.
I
I can't remember ever being offered upfront compensation.
So this is a falsehood.
This is a falsehood, and no longer require. It was never required.
Falsehood number 2.
Never required. The rule change leaves it open for individual home sellers to negotiate such offers with a buyer's agent outside of the MLS platforms, though the home seller's broker has to disclose any such compensation agreements. So, which it says to negotiate for individual home sellers to negotiate such offers with a buyer's agent outside the MLS platforms. So that sounds like a for sale by owner, which is currently how it works.
Allowable right now.
Right, allowable. That's literally how it works right now. If you're a for sale by owner, if you're not a for sale by owner and you have your property listed with an agent, you would not be individually negotiating with a buyer's agent outside of an MLS platform, because
What would we be doing?
your agent would be talking to the buyer's agent and letting them know what it is. So this just doesn't make sense at all.
I don't like
this.
this
Is
line.
like they just made it up. They read someone else's article and said, I can't put the same stuff in. I should change it up. By the way, that settlement's 108 pages, so I'm not reading it. And also, I sold my space bar.
I was going to say buy a new keyboard.
Yeah, buy a new keyboard. An analyst with Keefe, Broyett, and Woods, a law firm, also anticipate the NAR rule changes will lead to lower agent commissions. I don't know how. And could persuade some home buyers to skip using an agent altogether.
Possibly, yeah.
This is my favorite slide.
Oh, I was going to say, can we skip this? Because I already don't like it.
No, and could persuade some home buyers to skip using an agent altogether. What's the old saying about someone who represents themselves in court? That they have a fool for a client. This university professor, law school professor, defendants representing themselves have a fool for a client most of the time. Those trained in the legal profession, which that last quote was from an attorney. Those trained in the legal profession often point to a famous Abraham Lincoln quote when discussing pro se defendants. The man who represents himself has a fool for a client. Sounds like Abraham Lincoln was a pretty smart guy.
I watch a lot of like murder TV, court TV, just a thing I do to decompress. Anytime the defendant like represents themselves, or probably even the plaintiff, but I'm thinking defendant specifically, it usually doesn't go well.
No.
In a court scenario.
No.
I have an attorney backing me up right here.
Right, exactly. And it says,
Thank you, Stephanie.
yep.
Good name.
There's Stephanie Warsmith from the Akron Beacon Journal.
Shout out.
There's a lot to be said about that, said Assistant Summit County Prosecutor Brian Loprinci, who heads the criminal division. Not that they aren't capable or smart enough, but they haven't had the training. If you don't know the rules, how do you do it?
Sometimes the judge yells at you just because of procedural things.
Sure, absolutely. That's in the courtroom. Let's relate that to representing yourself buying a house. Because this analyst with Keefe, Brilliant, and Woods says that it could persuade some home buyers to skip using an agent altogether.
They did say that.
So, and the next one did say,
oh
man, my clicker stopped working.
That's not true.
Did say that, oh man, not my clicker. That it's not that you're dumb and that you're stupid. You just don't have the training.
Yeah.
If you don't know the rules, how do you do it?
There are rules to games.
Generally, people buy 1, 2, maybe 3 houses in their lifetime. And somehow you think that you should not use an agent. I have bad news for you. If you're representing yourself and you're going against an agent who has listed the property,
has some training,
knows the rules, and does this, a good agent, 50 to 100 times a year, they are going to eat your lunch.
Yeah. I can play basketball. Ask
Right.
my father. I shouldn't.
Yeah.
I'm not good at it. I also don't even know the rules. Like when I'm watching my nephews play their game, I have to ask lots of questions. I don't know what's going on. And that's just dribbling a ball without thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars involved. There's a skill set here. And for a buyer to be unrepresented going into a discussion, a negotiation, a sale with someone like you said, Mark, who is trained. Wow. Like that's concerning. That is very concerning for home buying in general.
I have been involved in transactions where buyers have tried to represent themselves.
Okay. How'd it go?
For the most part, it's not pretty. People watch HGTV, like you and I talked about in the last podcast.
Yeah.
You watch it.
I'm sorry.
I won't get close to that thing.
Murder and HGTV.
But
that's where it's at.
People watch that stuff and they think that's how it works, and they don't understand the ins and outs. They don't understand the how the mortgage process works. They don't understand how the home inspection process works.
Mark, you and I were texting today that like even just Centre County is such a transient area. People are moving in and out from other states. It just varies per state, the differences. Like
absolutely.
From Pittsburgh to Philly to here, it varies. Like, my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, I got into an argument with a guy that thought there was a 3-day attorney review in Pennsylvania. That doesn't exist.
No.
Like, if you move here from somewhere else and you think that you know the rules from the state that you came from, bad news, you don't.
Yeah.
It's different all the time. Yeah. I have friends that live in different states. They ask me real estate questions and I say, dude, I don't know.
This is how it works in PA.
Yeah, I will tell, and I'll preface everything I tell them. This is how it works in Pennsylvania. I can't tell you how it works in Florida or Maryland or Delaware or wherever.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you how they do things in Harrisburg.
It's very different.
Because everybody has, as I call them, tribal rules.
Real estate's very local.
The way they do things.
Very local.
But I would not recommend to any buyer of real estate to go and represent themselves, because it's probably, that property is probably listed by an agent, and more than likely there's 2 scenarios that will occur there for the most part.
What do you got?
You will get a very experienced, seasoned agent that knows exactly what they're doing, and they're there to represent their seller client. Right. They have a fiduciary duty to that seller client. They will do whatever is best for that seller client, even if that involves not helping that buyer at all with anything. So if you don't know how to calculate how many days are in your inspection time period, do you think that seller's agent's going to call you and remind you that you need to respond to your inspection reports on a certain day? Nope.
Nope.
Or do you have any idea the things that would be customary or reasonable to ask for in a home inspection? Probably not.
Nope.
I train our new agents, and agents that have been through hundreds of hours of training when they go through 75 hours for the state, 48 to 60 hours with me, plus any kind of on the job training kind of stuff. They are still have no idea what they're doing.
There's so much to this business.
Right.
So much.
There is a very, very steep learning curve. Even after, they've some of the agents on my team, after they've gone on appointments with me, there's still things that they have never seen. So you think you should honestly represent yourself
Great idea.
against another agent? Because it is an adversarial relationship. You think you should represent yourself against an agent who's seasoned? Because the other scenario on that is a listing agent that doesn't know what they're doing.
That's number 2.
Right. So now you have 2 people involved in the transaction that don't know what they're doing. That sounds even worse. Because more than likely, that seasoned agent, that veteran agent that we talked about before, they're going to make sure the deal gets to closing. It's not going to work out in the buyer's best interest. They're going to get the closing, and that closing's going to happen because he wants to get paid, and he's going to make sure he gets paid. The other one, good chance it never closes because you got 2 people that don't know what they're doing.
Probably not.
So there's a good chance it just doesn't close, and if it does, it's going to be painful. It's going to be ugly. Things are going to be missed, and you're not going to be happy. So...
Good points.
Right. So, we're making the process simpler. This
That's what
guy
I read.
says it's better off if they might skip agents altogether.
That's what I read, yeah.
Yeah. Next guy.
What do we got?
Home buyers could still ask a prospective seller for a concession that includes money to help cover for buyer's agent's compensation. Still ask, because we do that already.
Continue.
However, a home seller with multiple offers, for example, could refuse such a request or opt to go with a bid from a different buyer who isn't asking for such a concession. Oh, hold up.
I feel like this is true.
It is
Why
true.
are we on hold?
It is true. But didn't someone else tell us not too long ago that this settlement was so much better for buyers?
Yeah.
So much better.
Yeah, I think I read that with you.
Right. Back when we had a level playing field, it was worse for buyers.
But this also assumes almost multiple offers, right? That there are multiple buyers clamoring for your home. And I think the compensation change where buyers may now have to compensate their agents, have that additional expense, reduces the likelihood of that multiple offer situation.
I would definitely agree with that, which is bad.
We don't always agree.
Which is bad for sellers. Now that
So buyers pay more and sellers don't get multiple offers.
Right. Because now we've removed a number of buyers from the marketplace
And I
altogether.
never knew sellers didn't like inflated home prices.
Yeah.
I thought they friggin' loved that.
Yeah, apparently they were like deflated ones.
Okay. Done. Take it away.
Right.
Gone.
So
Off the list.
so far we've heard that this is better for buyers until they end up in a multiple offer situation, and then they're kind of hosed.
Okay.
The real solution is for the industry to work to remove regulatory barriers that make it difficult for buyers to include this compensation in their mortgages, says Stephen Brobeck, senior fellow at the Consumer Federation of America. And that's what's going to happen is people are going to have to be able to roll this into their mortgage on top of the home price.
Correct.
Which I'm still not sure how that's going to work, because you have people that are getting, like, an FHA mortgage is a 96.5% mortgage, which means they're getting a mortgage for 96.5% of the sales price of that property. So let's presume it appraises for the sales price. If you add 2.5% on there, or 3% in the air quotes standard commission.
I do love when you do air quotes.
Air quotes, standard commission. Then that makes it 99.5% mortgage, which means they have zero equity in their home.
Hashtag affordable housing.
Yeah, exactly. And now they're going to pay for that commission for the next 30 years.
Great idea.
Or 7 until they move, which is the industry average.
7 to 10, yeah.
Yeah. Or State College, 3 years. So not so far what we've determined
bueno.
is probably not good for buyers, also not good for sellers.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of upside here.
Right. Powerful realtor group agrees to slash commissions to settle lawsuits.
It didn't happen.
There is nothing in that settlement that says anything about the number on the commissions.
No, I read it and I highlighted it. There's the word slash isn't in it.
Oh, the slash I'm sure is not in there.
Definitely
Excellent
not.
guitarist, not in the settlement.
Correct.
Yes.
Mark grew up in the 80s.
Right. But there's nothing in there that says that the commissions are going to change whatsoever.
It just says how they are communicated.
Right.
Is going to change, and the fact the seller doesn't have to pay it, which they never had to, is just reiterated.
Right. That's not in there at all, that it says the seller doesn't have to pay it. It just says they can't tell you what it is in the MLS. They can tell you what it is outside the MLS, just not in the MLS.
Yeah.
Not in one website.
I feel like I'm playing like Twister or like a board game at this point. Like we should be upping the level of professionalism and not decreasing the craziness.
Yeah.
Or increasing the craziness. I guess decreasing the professionalism increases the craziness.
All of these journalists should enter into some sort of national trade organization, and maybe there is one,
MIBS,
where they could improve their professionalism and actually read the settlement that they're writing about. And they would find out that there's nothing in that settlement that says commissions have to be changed at all.
No. And like it literally says in the settlement that we can't say that we're working for free.
Right.
So now I almost have to charge something.
Mm-hmm.
So problem.
Logic.
Does not carry.
American homeowners could
There are more?
But wait, there's more.
Oh my word.
American homeowners could see a significant drop in the cost of selling their homes after a real estate trade group agreed to a landmark deal that will eliminate a bedrock of the industry, the standard 6% commission.
Also not noted in the settlement.
Nothing in the settlement says anything of the sort. Not even close. This was the New York Times, by the way. Nothing in there that says that.
Sensationalism at its best.
Yes. Literally, this is, as we've said before, fake news.
It's just depressing. It's just sad. You know, like again, let's get back to helping the home seller and helping the home buyer. And this article doesn't do that.
So far, we have seen headlines from CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and I think one other one. And everything in it so far has been incorrect.
Mark, I literally have an article printed that calls us the cartel.
A cartel. I mean, by definition, we probably are. But
what's the definition of a cartel?
The connotation is not correct.
No, it's unfortunate. And for people, so many people own homes. What an understatement. So many people want to buy homes. And we're going to reference that as like a cartel industry?
Yeah, I want to be the Pablo Escobar of real
goodness.
estate.
I did speak Spanish before.
Yeah, you did. Soon, you too will be the Pablo Escobar.
Oh, gracias.
This was my excellent highlighting. Americans pay...
Snippet tool.
Yeah, these are all just screenshots from... Americans pay roughly $100 billion in real estate commissions annually. And real estate agents in the United States have some of the highest standard commissions in the world.
You don't need to say it again.
Air quotes. There is no standard commission. We've
go.
talked about this.
He said it again.
In many other countries, commission rates hover between 1% and 3%. In the United States, most agents specify a commission of 5 or 6% paid by the seller. First of all, they're not always paid by the seller either. Like I've been paid by the buyer before in a for sale by owner situation.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about that in other countries, they don't have buyer agency. So
it's a very different system, very different service.
Correct. Like we're not comparing apples to apples.
I was just going to say not comparable.
If the buyer has an agent, the seller's agent agrees to share a portion of the commission with that agent when listing the home on the market.
Why'd you highlight that?
Why did I highlight that?
Please tell.
Because the premise of the NAR lawsuit, the lawsuit against NAR from these home sellers, was that they did not know and also they did not believe that they should be paying the buyer's agent.
So you didn't read. Let's just put real quick.
They're not. They never were.
Explain that to me.
So I can only speak for Pennsylvania, as we've said,
Sure.
because I've never practiced real estate in any other state. The Pennsylvania real estate form, the listing contract, says that the listing agent will be paid a certain percentage,
a number,
not a standard percentage.
A negotiable amount.
A negotiable amount. Anywhere from 0 to 100%. And then it says, out of the listing agent's commission, that listing agent agrees to share with a buyer's agent a certain amount of money. But the NAR lawsuit alleged that those people didn't know they were paying a buyer's agent. They weren't. They were paying a listing agent
who then shared
his portion of the commission because someone else helped him do his job of selling the property. Mm-hmm. And I use him as a gender neutral term. So this article alleges that that is in fact true, which would, in my opinion, negate the entire lawsuit. I'm no attorney. I wait for my sister-in-law to be that person. If the buyer has an agent, the seller's agent agrees to share a portion of the commission with that agent. Yeah, that was the whole premise. And this is again why NAR's attorneys were terrible, because this journalist agrees with what NAR's position was, that they're not, those sellers were not paying the buyer's agent.
No.
The listing agent was. The sellers were paying the listing agent. I, on the other hand, allege that the buyer is paying everyone.
Both of them.
The buyer is the only one who brings money to closing, unless the seller has no equity. But the buyer brings all the money to closing. They're the ones paying all the fees.
I know. I agree.
They're paying the price of the house, which it's AKA baked into, as it said in another article.
There were a lot of articles about baking in.
Baking in. I love baking.
I don't like baking. I like cooking.
Steph's up there making us a pie. And some bread. And
no, she definitely is. But to my point of reading, and to your point of what you just reiterated about the Pennsylvania listing contract, at least the standard listing contract provided by the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors.
There is, in fact, a standard listing contract. So we all use the same one.
Yeah, should that be read, that should also be understood. And, before this settlement, you and I were talking about podcast topics, podcast ideas, just real estate stuff in general. And one of the things I told you is I don't think people are being explained these forms at all times and they're understanding them, right?
Sure.
That's part of your job. You're selling an investment of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do your due diligence as well, right? Do your due diligence as well. I pray that your real estate agent explains that to you. And I know our RE/MAX Centre Realty agent is going to explain that to you. I can't say that about all of them, right?
And it's also a two-way street that sellers actually have to pay attention.
Read.
I sat at a guy's table one time and went over his entire estimate of closing costs while I had a bourbon with the guy. And I don't know if we drank too much bourbon or what, but when closing time came around, he didn't understand where all those closing costs came from.
I don't know if this is a good story.
We'll just leave it with that. But he was very angry that he was paying closing costs.
Yeah, I've received calls from girlfriends in other states who have said, hey, Kate, I put 20% down or this much down, but now there are other costs associated with it, right? And I'm not just saying it's agents locally or wherever it might be, or in Pennsylvania. Sometimes it's not always explained, or maybe it is explained thoroughly and not understood, but dude, try a little, you know, read the documents you are signing.
Oh yeah.
Please.
I got lots of stories about that.
Please. And if you do not understand them, ask me about them 8 times, because I want you to understand them. And that's what I feel like this lawsuit is mostly about, is there's a level of not understanding, which is just unfortunate.
I would 100% disagree with you. This lawsuit is only about attorneys making a ton of money.
Oh, okay. I feel you on that.
Yeah.
How did that happen? How are attorneys paid? Are they paid on a percentage?
They're paid on a standard percentage of 33%.
You lie.
I have no idea, but neither did these people that wrote these articles.
No, but often attorneys are paid on a contingent fee basis, which is often a percentage of the settlement amount.
100%. Do you really think that these people...
I worked for an attorney.
You worked for an attorney.
You went to law school. Or
I didn't go to law school.
Okay, we're about to. Yeah. That's how this works. When does that lawsuit happen?
Yeah. So
I'm sorry.
At the original settlement, this was supposed to be $1.8 billion. I
wonder why.
What's 33% of that? It's $600 million. And my 2.5% that I get is apparently too much. It's too much. Some guy's going to make, and we'll look at a picture of him in a minute, that was going to make $600 million. I bet he's pissed that his paycheck got cut down to $120 million. And I bet he has expenses involved in that too. Guess he and I are in the same boat. Next part of this article.
You do like boats.
The lawsuits argued that NAR and brokerages who required their agents to be members of NAR had violated antitrust laws by mandating that the seller's agent make an offer of payment to the buyer's agent and setting rules that led to an industry-wide standard commission. There's that word again. Doesn't exist. Without that rate essentially guaranteed, agents will now most likely have to lower their commissions as they compete for business. That rate has never been guaranteed because there was no such thing as a standard commission. As we've talked about, before it went to zero, the minimum commission was how much?
A penny.
1 penny. Good old Abe Lincoln, who we talked about earlier, who always said the person who represents himself is a fool for a client. So there's, once again, no standard commission. We've beat that to death. That rate has never been guaranteed anywhere. There is literally zero guarantees in this business.
I would love a good guarantee.
Yeah, I would love a guarantee in this business too. I am so without guarantee in this business.
Risk reward.
I can be sitting at a closing and I'm still like, I'm not sure if I'm going to get paid.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I'm not sure if I'm going to get paid. Like this person could, like, if you listen to the last episode with Brandy McCauley.
Such a good one.
Sitting at closing, guy left.
He was signing documents, if I listened correctly.
And left.
Yeah.
And never to return.
Didn't buy the house.
Didn't buy the house. That agent worked, did their job.
Showed up to closing.
Did not get paid. Because there was no money to be made there.
Translate that to your current job.
Right.
It's crazy to think about. I mean, it's just a crazy business.
Right. And not only, like, you can translate that to your current job, but also if you're going to translate it to your current job, also take a bunch of money with you to work one day, flush it down the toilet, and then don't get paid or reimbursed for it.
What am I flushing down the toilet for? The initial expenses of starting your own business?
Well, I'm sure if that agent, let's use that example, that guy who walked out of closing and just didn't finish closing.
Which is a true story.
Which was a true story. That agent ran all over town, showed that person a bunch of houses.
Flushing right now.
Yep, showed that person a bunch of houses. They're probably sitting at closing with a closing gift.
Oh, sad day.
Which is probably $100, $200, which only $15 of that is deductible on your taxes, by the way, thanks to IRS regulations. So if you ever bought a house and your agent gave you anything worth more than $15, they could only deduct $15 of that. So they paid for the rest of that out of their standard commission, which doesn't exist. So if you're relating that to your regular job, think about spending money to go to work and then not getting paid at the end of the day.
It's insane.
But we're doing it, and the good ones are making it happen. But apparently we're horrible, horrible people who make it difficult. And now the transparency is better, or lack of.
What do we got?
This is another favorite of mine. Some experts said the shift on commission structure and the billions of dollars that would flow into the housing market as a result could spark a recovery in the housing market, going so far as to say that it could be as significant as the 1930s New Deal. A flurry of legislation and executive orders signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt designed to stabilize and rebuild the nation's economic recovery following the Great Depression. This included the Better Housing Program, blah, 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 blah.
I rolled my eyes. I'm sorry.
Why did you roll your eyes?
I don't know. This is just...
Well, it's a little far-fetched, I would believe.
We're going back to the New Deal.
The New Deal.
We're grasping at straws here.
Right. You want to know what Investopedia said about the New Deal?
Please tell me.
Bottom line, the New Deal policies implemented by Roosevelt went a long way in helping to reduce income inequality in America. But with regard to the task of reviving an economy in crisis, the New Deal is considered by many to have been a failure. So great comparison.
So I look at reports a lot. I'm a nerd. You're out showing houses. I'm at my computer looking at reports, right? This is kind of what I do. A recent study showed that the main reasons why people aren't buying houses is A, they can't find the house that they love. Got it.
Lack of inventory.
Makes sense. I hear you on that. And then interest rates are also a little scary, right?
Sure.
Interest rates are scaring them. I have not heard the commission problem being a reason why people aren't buying houses or people aren't selling houses.
Well, it's
I
going
don't
to be.
even think it was on the selling side when I looked at that report. Like it's just we've created a problem, and that is terribly unfortunate. I don't think looking back to the New Deal solves this problem whatsoever, and maybe someone should talk to the Fed.
Right. We have now created a problem that did not exist in the past.
And interest rates aren't terrible right now. Let me clarify that.
They're not.
But if that is a concern for consumers, allow us to address that piece instead of this commission piece that was not addressed on any of the survey or reporting.
Somehow billions of dollars will flow into the housing market as a result.
Did they consult Roosevelt?
Manna from the heavens. That's apparently what's going to happen. In July, lawsuit gets approved, settlement gets approved, manna from the heavens, billions of dollars.
I feel anxious.
And I don't hate it, because if that's what's going to happen, I'm going to sell tens of houses and I'm going to make a ton of money.
I guess so.
That's not what's going to happen, FYI.
And there's more.
But wait, there's more. And the online databases used to buy and sell homes, the M.L.S. I don't know anyone who does that anymore. The settlement requires that any fields displaying broker compensation be eliminated entirely. It also places a blanket ban on the long time requirement that agents subscribe to multiple listing services in the first place in order to offer or accept compensation for their work. Kate, as the broker of RE/MAX, is that a true statement that you have to belong to multiple listing services to offer or accept compensation for your work?
No.
That's 100% not true.
No.
Can I go to Harrisburg? Well, I shouldn't use Harrisburg because we're all part of the same MLS there.
Let's go somewhere else.
Let's go to Clinton County, because I am not a member of the West Branch Association of Realtors multiple listing service.
Yeah, RE/MAX is not in general.
Right. Could I go over there and accept compensation for my work?
Yeah.
100%.
You could.
Yep. There is not a ban on that. There was never a long time requirement. This is also fake news.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, what we are talking about, agents already do. We just need to do it on a larger scale. But I could go to Pittsburgh, which we are not a member of that MLS. I'm not required to be in order to sell a house there. I'm licensed in the entire state of Pennsylvania. And I could say, hey, are you willing to work with me? What are you paying out, right? Are you willing to compensate me? Do my buyers need to compensate me? What's the deal? And move forward through that conversation. Get it in writing and sell that house.
And that's exactly how it's going to work. And that's pretty much how it has worked in the past.
Correct. Just kind of minimally, because we had a system in place and now the system is taken away. So now we need to work a little harder, but be paid less for it.
Right. There's just going to be another separate website that's not the MLS that's going to have all of the buyer agent compensation numbers on it.
Probs.
Yeah. And the couple that have zeros for not paying buyer agent compensation will also have a category next to them of days on market that will be astronomical.
Seeing that correlation will be interesting. We have some studies that show that. Even some of the articles.
The articles even said that.
Have mentioned that, but seeing that continue through the future will be very interesting to track.
The settlement includes many significant rule changes. Actually, I think it's like 2. It bans NAR from establishing any sort of rules that would allow a seller's agent to set compensation for a buyer's agent, a practice that critics say has long led to steering, in which buyer's agents direct their clients to pricier homes in a bid to collect a bigger commission check. We already talked about that. No one's doing that. I don't even look at what the commission amount is when I show a house. When I sell it, I look at it so I can do my back end bookkeeping of here's where my cash flow is coming into my business. I don't look at what it is when I sell it to someone. Maybe I should, but I'm more concerned with, let's find this person a property that they really like, a property that's going to help them meet their goals. If they're an investor, if they're a first-time home buyer, if they're downsizing, I'm trying to help them find the property that they want to buy.
Yeah.
I'll figure out what I'm getting paid after the fact.
But this becomes a bigger topic, a bigger discussion point with buyers in regard to, okay, this is what we've gone under this is what we have a contract for between me and you, buyer, right? Because I'm required now to enter into agreement with you.
Right.
Before I wasn't. It was a little more open, a little more flexible. So this is what we're under contract for. This percentage, this seller is not paying any commission. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And it gives almost the buyer more of an out to not purchase that home if they can't afford it. And as you talk about first-time home buyers, veterans, FHA, right? All of these categories, I feel like sellers are unfortunately going to limit their pool should compensation be something they choose not to offer.
Correct.
And that's certainly their choice, but there are certainly pros and cons to doing so.
Correct. So there is a pool of buyers in the market at any time.
Yeah.
Once these changes go into effect in July, you're going to have some buyers that just say, I don't want to participate in that. I can't afford to pay someone. I'm a veteran. I'm not allowed to pay someone. So I'm not even going to participate. They're going to take a step out. So now you've taken away the supply of buyers. So the demand of homes has now gone down.
What happens when demand goes down, Mark?
Prices also go down.
No.
Supply and demand.
Is that proven?
It's a weird thing. It's this little thing called economics. It is proven because it's a law of supply and demand, not a theory of supply and demand. I did only have very little economics. So, I might be an idiot. Who knows? I have a degree from a prestigious university.
You're funny. I had a finance professor in college, and to be honest with you, I didn't do that great in his class because he didn't teach us much. He didn't teach us much that was on the exam. I'll be honest with you, but he taught us so much real world stuff. Like he just talked about everything.
The actually important stuff.
Yeah. And so one of the things he taught me was read the headlines every day. Read the headlines every day. Know what's going on in current events. And he's like, that's super important. So guess what? I pull up Google News every day, at least twice a day, and I read it. Buyers know what's going on right now. And what they know what's going on is not correct.
It's not correct.
And that impacts what you were saying, the demand of properties. And
As
it's
we've
just
seen.
unfortunate for sellers that they've put themselves in this situation.
As we've seen throughout this entire episode, is the articles that are out there are all wrong.
Most of them, yeah.
I mean, maybe I was looking for the most ridiculous ones when I made this
The
up.
cartel was the most ridiculous.
The cartel, that's your favorite.
It is.
But I didn't really see any that were like, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is really not a big change. They have to sensationalize everything to get people to read it. And then you have people that think they know what's going on. And then I go meet with them and explain to them, this is what's really happening. And then nothing has really changed a whole lot. But the media headlines are hilarious. Ah, yes.
I didn't see this one.
Mr. Michael Ketchmark.
Hey, Mike.
The attorney behind the home seller's legal, air quotes, triumph.
Oh, is this who we have a picture of?
NAR is finally out of the business of forcing homeowners to pay inflated commissions.
Mike, we got to talk.
I have never forced anyone to pay anything. I have had conversations with people. I have had negotiations with people.
Probably educated some.
I have educated people. And if we just can't decide to work together, then we just part ways. I have never held a gun to anyone's head and said, you're paying the standard commission, fella.
I'm forcing you.
I'm forcing you to pay the standard commission. None of that's ever happened. And judging by the way this guy dresses,
that tie.
That's
not a modern tie.
Yeah, you would think it's someone who's going to make like $120 million.
He can afford a new tie now.
Or maybe, he could get a better tie, and someone could help him with his collar.
Apparently 33% is acceptable.
Yeah, 33% is good.
I had no idea.
Forcing homeowners to pay inflated commissions.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. I should have thought of that. Start forcing people to pay things. Get like a whole clan of, like the Minotti family. Their name ends in a vowel. So
Minotti cartel.
The cartel.
Sorry, Minotti.
So to get them out there, just forcing people to pay the standard commission. Yeah. So that's the fella behind it all. He's going to be richer than all of us.
And by the way, they're not out of the business. and
No.
they're not forcing. So the whole statement is just
No,
incorrect.
as a matter of fact, they're probably going to raise my dues and your dues to
Which
be
increases expenses.
a member of NAR, which increases expenses for everyone. And I got to make that up somewhere. As a business owner, I'm passing that fee along to the consumer. I don't just eat it. So,
And let's backtrack. This doesn't impact all agents. And so some
correct.
people,
Only 50% of them.
yeah. And so some people are going to have
Good job, Mike.
the same
He does kind of
business
look.
they did.
He does kind of look like Michael Scott from The Office.
A little bit.
And
I had
I
to
do
look
like
real
Michael
quick.
Scott, but
He'd have a better tie.
yeah, Michael Scott would have a better tie. And if the
Steve
comparison,
Carell?
yeah,
Okay.
if the comparison is that Michael Scott would have a better tie than you, and you have hundreds of millions of dollars, you should reevaluate your wardrobe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, your life, props.
Maybe, but ambulance chaser, I'm sure, whatever.
Charges a percentage.
That's the last one that we got there. So I think it's pretty obvious that the media headlines on this are a little askew.
Unfortunate but true.
If someone would like to provide me with some factual media headlines, I'd be happy to look at those. But most of or I'd be even happy to comment on some of these media headlines. If any of my, I think, 21 followers
And growing.
or a journalist, an air quotes journalist, would like to get my comment on this and see how that NAR settlement's going. Now I feel fairly educated with it, although I did not read 108 pages of it like you did, Kate.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything crazy. I think let me go through my list. You can tell me not to go through my list, by the way.
Oh no, you go right through it.
Some headlines. I'm not as fancy as you with a little
The
presentation.
clicker and the presentation.
But yeah, the 6% commission is gone.
It's gone.
Never was.
It's
So
gone.
maybe that's why it's gone. How to make sure the 6% home commission really does die, because the settlement doesn't do that.
Someone said the settlement doesn't do that.
Yeah, that was a fascinating
But
one.
wait, all of those other people, journalists, air quotes,
Yeah, no.
said it was dead.
No.
Oh, it's on life support.
Yeah, there was a whole op-ed about it. And in that op-ed, it mentioned something that you had mentioned before, right? That analyzing home sales when a lower commission rate was being offered, those properties were likely not to sell
Oh,
or not sell at all.
not sell at all. That doesn't sound like it's good for a seller.
It doesn't. Now, the next sentence is this individual blames the agents for that.
Oh, it's the agent's fault.
But again, I think it comes down to, can the buyer afford that? And I feel like we didn't think about that. Or they didn't think about that. The man with the nice tie.
The man with the nice tie.
I'm just confused. The real estate commissions are about to get much cheaper. Hope you didn't buy stock in Zillow.
News to me. Zillow stock is down significantly.
Lots of real estate stock.
I know. I
is
just
down,
bought
think.
Remax stock because it went down. And
Buy down, sell up.
I know it's coming up. Mm-hmm. I bought Zillow stock the last time it took a dump, and that was a bad time. When they were using their algorithm to the Zestimate to buy a bunch of properties, and then try to resell them at a profit, and their Zestimate did not work, and they lost hundreds of millions of dollars.
Nor did it work for their CEO.
No, their CEO's house sold for 30% less than his estimate. So, but even Zillow will tell you it's an estimate. It's not a Zactimate.
They should change that marketing.
Yeah.
And pay you for it.
Yeah.
What else was I thinking of? But yeah, probably the most interesting thing to me in reading through the settlement is one of the last paragraphs about practice changes, right? The settlement is over 100 pages, but the practice changes section is of the most probably importance to the consumer as well as the real estate agent. It says pretty much the obligations or the changes set forth herein, assuming that they are going to be approved probably in July and then implemented also in July, will terminate 7 years after the Class notice date.
So this is temporary.
I'm not an attorney. I just have some papers and a paperclip. But, like, I'm confused. So is this that important that this needs to happen? Or it just needs to happen for 7 years?
Well, funny story, Kate. I didn't see that in any of the articles that we read.
Lies.
This was only 7 years.
Like, and I'm reading it verbatim. Like,
You mean out of the actual settlement that's been proposed?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of words after it. I just don't understand. The obligation set forth in this paragraph, which is the practices changes, will terminate 7 years after the class notice date.
Well, that's good because I got like 14 years left in the biz.
Do you?
Yep. That's my date, when I turn 60. So
know.
like 7 years from now, we're going back to normal, whatever normal is. We're going back to standard commissions.
I think it's just, to reiterate, it is so important that the seller does understand what they are or are not paying for, the pros and cons of what they are or are not paying for, what that means for the buyer, and then for both parties to have some sort of representation to talk through all of those pros and cons with.
Absolutely. That representation part is very important.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing with this lawsuit is done is there is a potential that buyers will not be able to have representation.
Sad day.
And there are bad agents out there that will just eat those buyers for lunch. And those buyers will end up paying more for a house than they should and getting horrible terms and conditions and just getting a bad deal. So this lawsuit helps no one.
I haven't seen a lot of help. No.
It does not help the consumer whatsoever because sellers may think that they're going to not have to pay as much to sell their house. But at the end of the day, the net to them is going to be the same and they're going to, or less. It's not going to be higher because they're going to have a smaller pool of buyers. And from a buyer's perspective, they're either going to have to finance that commission or if it's not being offered, or they're not going to have representation at all. And they're going to be at a disadvantage. So the only person that helps is the Michael Scott lookalike with the bad tie who makes a couple $100 million and, buys a new private jet. So he's the only person who's making out.
Yeah.
No one else is getting helped in this.
No, it's terribly unfortunate.
So hate realtors all you want, but if it's such an easy job, RE/MAX is always hiring. We would love for you to come on and just crush it and show us all how easy this business is.
I welcome you.
Yeah, because I would love for you to show any of us how easy it is because it's not an easy business.
Not getting paid, not easy.
I know.
Yeah. And again, to your point before, NAR is a group that you can subscribe to. You don't have to subscribe to. They have a code of ethics that you subscribe to when you do join. When their dues go up and other realtor expenses go up because of this, there may be some that don't continue with the National Association of Realtors, and that means they don't subscribe to a certain code of ethics and do business very differently, to your point earlier.
Correct. And I think that's going to happen after this. I really think it is because there are a lot of people, myself included, that are disenchanted with the National Association of Realtors.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I'm getting anymore. I can look at the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors because we get standard forms. We have a legal hotline. NAR does a lot of political advocacy for us, but at this point they've had leadership struggles,
very recently. Yeah.
One guy is out. The last president is out. I shouldn't even say the last president because now he's like
2 presidents out, 3.
I mean, technically, if we're going down the line, he's 4 presidents back now because you got Kevin Sears, who's the current NAR president. You had an interim president who I don't even know who that was. Then you had the last president who was there, I think, for 4 weeks before she resigned because what it sounded like somebody had dirt on her and they threatened to make it public. So she just resigned. And then Kenny Parcells before that, who was accused of sexual harassment, and he was out. So there's leadership issues. Everyone talks about Bob Goldman retiring in the middle of it, but he had announced his retirement months before. This is, I've met the guy. He's, no offense to Bob, but he's no spring chicken. Like, this is, I'm sure, incredibly
His
stressful.
retirement may not have been related to this.
Yeah, I'm sure it was related, as in, this is stressing me the hell out, and I want out of it. I want to be done and just move on with my life and not have to deal with this crap anymore. And he was out, and everyone makes it out like, oh, they all got caught with their pants down, either literally or figuratively speaking.
My word.
And so they moved on. So people are looking at NAR going, why am I a member of this? But it's all tied together, which is probably even more problematic. That for me to be able to receive those PAR, Pennsylvania Association of Realtors standard forms, and the legal hotline and all the local advocacy that we have, I also have to be a member of the National Association of Realtors.
Yeah.
And the local association of realtors. So it's all tied together. So there's already talks of people trying to start their own new organizations, but I don't know exactly what that gets you.
Don't know.
Me either.
It's a little up in the air. There's some things that are just happening how they were. And it's probably good to talk to your real estate agent about all of it.
That's right. And while we haven't solved any problems tonight, I hope we've at least educated people to not believe that the sky is falling by listening to the media, and just living your best life, and talk to your real estate agent, and they'll help you get what you want to get done.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Generally ones from RE/MAX Centre Realty. They're the best.
That's the real goal.
They're the best.
They are.
In my opinion. All right, Kate, you got anything else?
That's all.
That's all I got. It's a Friday night. Go do something fun.
Sounds good.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mark.
It was a fun time.
Bye.